Welcome into the RotoViz Fantasy Football Podcast. It's week 16. It's the start-sit show. Our times are all over the place the last couple of weeks, Dave, but people keep showing up and the questions keep pouring in regardless. Obviously, with the holidays coming, schedules start to get tight in the evenings. And, I think people would like to have their questions answered as soon as possible. And, of course, we want to be efficient, too, so we can get back to the family. So we are going to be economic in this episode. We're going to hit a lot of the questions that came into the RotoViz email. People really getting a lot of questions in this week. It's semifinals week in most fantasy football leagues, and we know we still have some listeners that are definitely very live in some of the big tournaments too. So we're going to answer as many of these as we can get to, and maybe if there's time, Dave, we'll even answer one of our own start-sit conundrums with our teams here. But loving the Christmas sweater today.
Oh, thank you.
I did not pull back out my Santa hat for today. I thought my hair was looking pretty good. I didn't want to mess it up.
It is looking good. I went into a party actually at my daughter's school to help out. So that's why I have it on. Came back from here, and my camera finally came into focus now. So it's on full display. We got some reindeer, we got Santa, trees, other various Christmas items.
It's beautiful, man. You'll be bringing the Christmas cheer to these lineup questions here. So let's just get into it, man. As always, we're going to reference some of our game level similarity projections, which take into account similar matchups against similar defenses by similar players, and give us some kind of a broad lens of what to expect from some players. And then we'll get into the specific player element too when we're really stumped here. We're using the NFL Stat Explorer matchup analysis tab, which takes the specific game this weekend that we're talking about and some of the recent performances. So, Dave, let's just get into it with a question that I think is pretty interesting, because we had Breece Hall lay a total stinker last week. Jaylen Warren has been a little bit more on the back burner over the past month as compared to the heater that he was on in November. And then Ty Chandler, the big breakout game last week. So we got to pick two out of Breece Hall, Jaylen Warren, and Ty Chandler.
Sure. So I think we just immediately will go into the comparison tab. Breece, who you want to look at first? Breece Hall versus maybe Chandler? Yeah, let's just do it.
Yeah, I think those are the two front runners for me.
So this is actually kind of an interesting thing to see here, Curtis. You actually have Ty Chandler matching Breece Hall in the above 25 bucket. 6% of Chandlers get in the 20 to 25 bucket, none for Hall. You also have 14% in the 15 to 20 bucket for Chandler here, just 6% for Hall. Chandler with an average PPR of 9.9, and you have an average PPR for Hall of 9.1. Now, most weeks, this would be a pretty easy decision here. I think you would say, yeah, there's a little bit of difference here, but it's not enough of a disparity to go away from Hall. That said, it's hard to forget what we saw the last 2 weeks. Still, though, Curtis, I'm inclined to say that I'm sending out Breece Hall there against the Commanders.
Yeah. We are.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to drill in anymore here.
The Commanders have allowed 9 touchdowns to running backs over the past 5 weeks. That's 1.8 per week. In each of the past 5 weeks, an opposing running back has scored at least 19.7 PPR against the Commanders, and there are 3 instances in the last 4 weeks of 25 PPR plus against this defense. I know the Jets offense is floundering, and Breece had a bad week last week, and I wouldn't blame anyone for being a little gun shy on him, but you're rolling. And he's going to score a touchdown this weekend, Dave. I'll call the shot. I mean, Breece Hall scoring a touchdown for sure.
Wow.
And assuming that Madison's out, I'm starting Ty Chandler over Jaylen Warren just due to role and not splitting up the touches. So if Madison plays, it becomes a little bit more of a toss-up. So we can quickly look at this one just as a bailout.
Sure.
But,
so
I think the default is to start Chandler here over Warren.
Yeah, I agree with that. If you look, very similar distributions, an average of 10.2 for Jaylen Warren, average of 9.9 for Ty Chandler. We see Warren edge him out a little bit across the distribution. That said, though, Chandler does have a 10% delta in his favor in the percentage of matches that found the end zone via rushing. So it is a little bit of a toss-up. You have Minnesota playing against Detroit. This is a matchup I like a little bit more for the pass catchers on Minnesota, because I think that the fantasy points that we do see get accrued by that offense likely get scored by its pass catchers as opposed to its running backs. I think I would give, if Madison plays, the lean towards Warren.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I'm not really pumped about this Steelers backfield at all
right
now. So we're on the same page here. I think we beat this one up enough. Now
Okay.
you're gonna have to help me with this next one, Dave, because I've just got this long list of players. Like how many? Just PSA here, real quick, before we address this one. So anybody listening, whether it's on the podcast or if you're watching the live stream, if you want to get good, quick advice from us, and you want to ensure that we'll answer your question, like sending us your entire roster and then having us set your whole lineup, that's not really it's not what I mean. We'll
start sit show that doesn't work, right? Off-season podcasts, you can send in as much information as you can, but for start sit, this is a tough one to digest.
If you want me to break down your dynasty roster in March, this is the right way to do it. But for start sit show, man, we got like 100 people that we're trying to hit. Set your own lineup and then give us the one or two people that you're really concerned about, and we'll break that down. I will cut through the mess here, Dave, and say, let's just assume that we're starting 2 running backs and 3 wide receivers for this squad.
We're starting 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 2 flex, and a super flex.
I'm just not going to go through all that.
Yeah, I hear you.
It's not happening. So
I actually can say this too. As I'm looking through this, I don't really think they bolded the players they're thinking about. I really don't see many decision points here. I think that what they have in bold is where I would go. So his main question. He did give us his main questions.
Okay.
Are in the super flex spot, if he should go with somebody like Howell, which I guess it's a tough game for him to some degree playing the Jets, or someone with high upside like a Chan. He says he feels bad not throwing a guaranteed touches from a quarterback in the super flex slot, but realistically, it was a better shot at 20, 30, or even 40 points. So I kind of get what he's going at there. So let's just boil it down to that, Curtis. I will show you what we're looking at for Sam Howell. Now, I do know that the GLSP actually gives him, if you look at all players, he does slip into... Okay, yeah. So it's not. He does slip into the top 15 here against the Jets, despite it being a tougher matchup. Does get 18% of his matches beyond 25. We see an average of 17.6. Expected to go for like 244 yards, 1.4 touchdowns. The thing here, though, that's going to make this a little bit tougher is that Chan is the highest rated running back this week. Now, granted, you still have some games in here really elevating him, but 60% of his matches finding the end zone against defenses like Dallas. Should go for around 15 carries, 76 yards. Gets 8% of his matches beyond 25. Sounds like you had a comment already.
Well, I mean, the Jets held Tua under like 15 points last week. I mean, I'm not feeling great. I mean, even if Howell hadn't been benched last week, I mean, and Riverboat Ron's just up to his old tricks here. He's just, I mean, what does it accomplish at this point to put Jacoby Brissett into that game? I mean, it just doesn't. I don't see the point. I think he mentioned that he has Bailey Zappi on this roster.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
I mean, I would consider going there. Denver has been pretty susceptible over the past couple of weeks, not necessarily always to super high-end quarterbacks either. I mean, Josh Dobbs had a 20-point game. DTR in a tough spot when the Browns were on their 2-week West Coast trip, put up 15 points. Stroud in a partial game, I think it was 21 points. They did hold Easton Stick to 9 points 2 weeks ago. I think Zappi's been a little bit more successful than what we saw from Stick in that start. And then Jared Goff just torched this Denver team last week. Of course, that's an elite offense in Detroit. But I would almost, if I was going to go quarterback over a Chan, I would actually take Zappi over Howell, just because of the lack of the risk of getting benched, I guess.
Okay. I think the final
matchup. The matchup. I mean, the Jets matchup's brutal.
Yeah. Can we just put this context on it, though? If you were purely looking for upside, who do you think has more upside in this case, Zappy or Achane?
Oh, a Chan.
For sure. Okay, so I
Yeah.
think we've answered
I
that.
didn't know we were doing this against the running backs. Case in point, don't send 30 players in and ask us to sort it out.
Yeah, there's a lot to sort out here. I think we've answered their question though, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. I think we've given enough. I apologize. But we have a lot to get through for this one because a ton of people sent in emails, which is great.
All right, we have a live chat coming in from Adam. Adam was on the show, last couple weeks here.
Yep.
Sup, fellas? I'm back. Garrett Wilson versus Cooper Kupp versus pick 3 out of 5 here. So let's go to our GLSP rankings, and let's just look at the rankings there, and we can default and see if anybody falls out. I don't think that we have time to put the head-to-heads here on all of these.
No, so it's Wilson, Kupp, Adams, Metcalf, Diggs. Metcalf does look pretty good against the Titans this week from a GLSP perspective.
He's been playing well.
Garrett Wilson, we do know from working on the passing game matchup rater, has a very fantastic matchup for him in his matchup with the Commanders. Of course, you do have some level of question here of the type of quarterback play that you might get. Nonetheless, I think that Wilson makes a strong case to be in here. Could have a wide receiver 1 week, which would leave us looking here, Curtis, at Adams or Diggs, unless you wanted to push back on that. But I'm going to quickly punch in Adams and Diggs here for the comparison. You have Devontae Adams, you've got Stephon Diggs, and if we look at their averages, very much in favor of Adams with an average here this week of 16 PPR to Diggs, 12.7 across the distributions too. A pretty stark contrast in the 15 to 25 range, significantly in favor of Adams. So if you were only going off of GLSP, I think that you would have to leave Adams in there. So I think that's the backdrop here. I think that we have Metcalf in there. The other names you could choose from, I think that I actually would give a lean here towards Adams. You have Cooper Kupp in. It does not look like as great of a matchup for him. And I actually hate to leave Diggs out. So I think I end up, even though I talked, positively about Wilson, going with Diggs in over Wilson.
Well, we've got to sit too, right? I mean, I'll sit Wilson on the quarterback.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not sitting Cooper Kupp. I mean, Cooper Kupp scored touchdowns in 3 straight weeks. He's had at least 8 targets in 3 straight games. In the last 2 weeks, I mean, he had 8 catches, over 100 yards and a touchdown. I mean, he looks like he's like back. Like him and Stafford are vibing. I think he's back to his matchup proof ways.
Okay.
I'm not starting him there. I mean, as much as it pains me to say it, I mean, the Bills are big road favorites against the Chargers, and Diggs has been, rather cold of late. I mean, I would be tempted to sit Wilson and Diggs here, given what you found for us on Metcalf and Adams. I would probably start the middle 3 here: Kupp, Adams, and Metcalf.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm fine with that. I don't have enough of a level of pushback. And I mean, very honestly, this is one of those where, to a large extent, it kind of is a coin flip.
Awesome quintet of receivers there. That's obviously why this guy's in the semifinals.
For sure.
Great job, Adam. 3 spots for 4 guys: Bijan Robinson. What a frustrating player. Breece Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Chan.
Okay. So Chan, highest in the GLSP this week. You have Gibbs in the top 8, it looks like. And you also have here Robinson coming in at number 2. 3 spots for 4 guys. We have to leave one out of these. I think we've talked about Hall a little bit already. I think that you're going to go with him, Gibbs, and Chan. I mean, at this point, I think that you'd have the most concern about Bijan. I'll let you push back on that if you want, though.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that Chan and Gibbs are in here, and it comes down to sitting one of Bijan or Breece, and they both have great matchups. I mean, Robinson is a slight home favorite against the Colts. This is a big time game for both teams, and especially for the Colts. And I mean, the Colts have allowed some big games. I mean, Derrick Henry got there on him. Joe Mixon got there on him.
I have to change my answer, actually. Yep.
Over the course of the past couple weeks, but you just can't. I mean, Arthur Smith is just like he's just a fantasy lineup ruiner, and I mean, I'm just to the point where I don't know what to do with it. I don't know if he'll have rabbit ears and say, he obviously he's already gone yo-yo on the quarterback again.
Yep.
And we're gonna have Taylor Heineke out there. I mean, will he listen to all of the complaints about the lack of touches for Robinson and in London and Pitts last week? Like all the best players were not touching the ball. I mean, Robinson only had 7 attempts last week, rushing attempts, and 3 targets. I don't know. I mean, they are 2 good matchups, but I would probably start Brees. It's a coin flip. I'll go with Brees over Robinson. If you feel differently, I'm not going to probably fight you.
No, I think I know that's what the answer should be. The only tough thing is when you look in the GLSP and you see that 60% of players like Robinson found the end zone this week. We get just 10% of Hall finding it and actually in receiving work. Of course, you did guarantee us a Brees Hall touchdown this week. So we're going to go Hall. Robinson's on the bench.
Okay. We've got some dynasty stuff coming in here. I get to see some dynasty teams in the championship late into the playoffs, rather. Pick one. So we got Triflex settings. So for those of you following along, FFPC, it's tight end premium. Darren Waller, OBJ, Wan'Dale Robinson, Ramondre, or Devin Singletary. He's leaning towards starting Singletary, understandably. I don't think I can get there on Ramondre, Wan'Dale, or OBJ. Why don't we throw Singletary in versus Waller, just with the tight end premium settings here, just to for the exercise.
Sure. And then Waller will have to drill in on here quickly. If you just look at their averages in PPR, you have Singletary favored by around 2 points. Their distributions also favor Singletary, with him having a bit more in the high end, actually 14% more in the beyond 25 bucket. But the final piece we have to layer in here is that's not looking at the tight end premium component. So Waller's average projection puts him at 5.2 receptions on 7.4 targets. So he'd pick up, an extra, almost enough that it kind of brings this to more or less even, Curtis, I think here. 20% of Waller's matches finding the end zone as well. So it really comes down to, what do you think you can trust more? Waller to come back and be able to do some of the, the second week now, maybe get a little bit more work, or Singletary to carry forward some of the things that we've seen him do now the back half of the year?
Yeah, I mean, Singletary does have a really tough matchup against Cleveland. It's a home game. They're home dogs, but, he has been involved in the receiving game of late, and the Browns are not as tough there as they are, and actually the rushing production against opposing running backs. So, I mean, they're very middling in terms of what they allow from a receiving perspective. In 4 of the past 5 weeks, they've allowed at least 4 receptions to opposing running backs, and actually 6 and 5 over the past 2 weeks. So, I mean, I think that even if he has an inefficient day on the ground, his role, I mean, he had 26 carries last week, and he was getting peppered. We still don't know if Stroud's going to be back. So that's the other thing. Like, if Stroud doesn't play, then I think they're in a situation where, he gets all the dink and dunk usage again. And so
the receivers are banged up too.
Yeah, there's just ways for him to get bailed out. I think that the offense, even with Stroud back, probably has to lean on him. I would just feel better about going there than gambling on Darren Waller and the Giants.
I agree. So you're going with Singletary.
Yeah, let's go with Singletary. I think the listener was right there. PPR non-tight end premium. Okay, sit one. Puka, DK, or Rice. Oh wow, yeah. Current leanest to sit Puka. Yeah, that's a tough one, man. Again, that's another one where it's clear why this team is still playing in the semifinals week.
Right. So let's just look then at Puka versus Rice to start this off, and then I'll let you say a couple of things while I pop into the passing game matchup rater to confirm something. If you look this week, I know that the GLSP does like Rice. It actually has him with an average of 15.8 versus Puka's 10.3. As a result, we see Rice much more well distributed at the top end. And the final thing that I'll say in the matchup this week, for the Rams is that the defense that they're playing New Orleans, right? Yeah, I believe it's New Orleans. New Orleans is not favorable against the slot, which we've seen Puka do so much of his work. As a result of this, I had to lean towards Rice. Haven't looked him up in the passing game matchup rater yet, but I'm saying for me, it's most likely,
man.
okay, it's Rice and Metcalf.
Rice is hot. I mean, this Chiefs offense needs him. Like, I'm sitting Puka here too.
Okay.
We already said that we like Cup to be a little bit more invincible this week, given how he's looked the last couple. I mean, there probably isn't going to be room for multiple Rams receivers to get there. And I mean, of course, we could be on the wrong side of this one. Maybe it'll be Puka and not Cooper Cup. But the Saints defense has been really stingy to overall wide receiver production from opposing teams. There's typically been like one guy getting to that 15-point range per week, but it's not like a full position group is putting it on them in any given week. So I think again, listeners got this one right. Lean towards sit Puka. I think we get a double stamp from us here.
Perfect. All right, another question for us, Curtis.
Yeah, start one: DeAndre Swift, Achan, or Brees. And he's just saying that the reason he's only starting one of those backs is because he wants to play McBride and Laporta in the flex spot. I'm going to assume this is maybe an FFPC team too, because that even strengthens that argument. So I think this comes down to Swift versus Brees. You've already said Chan is really favorable in the GLSP this week.
Yes. So we see Swift coming in with an average stat line here of around 12 attempts, 57 yards, 50% of his matches finding the end zone on the ground, adding probably another 2 receptions. Most largely distributed in the 10 to 15 bucket with 32% of his matches in there. His upside is likely comparable to what we're seeing with Brees, according to the GLSP. I would argue, though, that I don't know. When you look at it here, Curtis, like I want to say Hall, but I think that Swift actually might be the answer here. Do you have a strong lean?
I think I would go with Swift over Hall in this context. The Eagles are big favorites. He got 18 carries last week. I mean, he's coming off of a more favorable last week situation than Brees, and they both have good matchups. So, I mean, we certainly would feel better about the Eagles, winning and dominating this game. This is a team on the slide. They need this home game against the Giants badly. This couldn't have come at a better time. And the Giants have just been super susceptible to opposing running backs. I mean, it's been a fairly fantasy friendly situation here. So let's sit Brees out of that group.
One wide receiver.
Start 2, 1 wide receiver and 1 wide receiver. Oh, and then 1 flex. OBJ, JSN, Zeke, Ramondre, and McKinnon.
Okay. So the first thing I can say is I know this is a good matchup for JSN. I think that you could expect a decent amount of, typical production like he's going to give you. He'll approximate his points per game. OBJ, I know that I do not feel great about this week. I actually looked into him to try to make a case for him as a guy that you could lean to for teams in need. I don't think that he falls into that this week. Ramondre, I'd have some concerns about. Then McKinnon, is always kind of a threat to come in and contribute. For some reason, though, Curtis, I think that I need to do a quick little search here on McKinnon. I seem to think that he might have been banged up a little bit. I don't know if that's true or not.
I'll validate for you here real quick. I mean, so the thing with McKinnon is he's been a decent floor play. But he
missed practice today too. Sorry.
He hasn't provided, those ceiling games. We haven't really seen ceiling games against the Raiders either. And the Chiefs figure to be heavy favorites here. So like if they get into a protect the lead run mode, it's probably more like CEH than McKinnon locking that down. Like, unless you want to say, hey, they got their lead because of a couple short dump offs to McKinnon in the red zone, which we've seen a lot over the last couple of years. But it was the Chiefs' backfield, Isaiah Pacheco, really the only big game against the Raiders by an opposing running back in the past 5 weeks. So, I think that's also worth noting. They got into a ground and pound, situation there. I don't see any reason here right now to think that McKinnon would just be out. I'm going to check one more source here. Stefania Bell updated her information just a couple of hours ago. So let's see if she's got something. There's nothing here. I mean, she's really only noting Jacobs, Pacheco, and Sky Moore at this point.
Okay.
So, maybe McKinnon wasn't active today, but it doesn't look like he says it won't practice Thursday, groin tweak.
Okay.
So, I mean, yeah,
right.
maybe,
So it looks
maybe
like
keep an eye on that. But right now, I think the answer for me would be McKinnon over Ramondre, just because he's gotten 10 plus PPR 4 out of the past 6 weeks.
Yeah.
On the receiving opportunity and touchdown likelihood.
Okay.
Let's see here. Oh, Russ or Gino? That's a simple one. That's a classic start sit question.
This
right
is
there.
Fantastic. We love this. It's not often we get these simple ones like this. All right, so we got Gino versus Russ. Given that this is a nice compact question here, we'll put them into the GLSP. You see Smith against Tennessee favored by about a point over Russ against the Patriots. Russ edges him out at the very tippy top there if you look in the above 25 buckets. But across the distribution, I would say that you're seeing there is some disparity there between Wilson and Smith. It is interesting though that Smith, despite what I would call like a worse overall distribution, has things a little bit in his favor there. The final thing that we'll look at here, Curtis, before I let you take a stab at this, you have 1.6 expected passing touchdowns for Russ with 0.2 rushing touchdowns. Gino would be at 1.8 passing touchdowns, 0.2 rushing touchdowns, a little bit in Smith's favor there against Tennessee from a touchdown standpoint. This one is pretty close. Do you have any thoughts before I give my opinion?
My thoughts are that neither one of these guys has an awesome matchup, but Russell Wilson's matchup is probably tougher. And I like Geno Smith's wide receivers more.
Yep. So you're going to go with Geno as well. That's where I was headed.
Yeah. I am.
All right.
Okay. Josh Pesh, eliminate one. DeAndre Swift,
I like
Saquon
these
Barkley, Rashad White, and David Montgomery. Okay. We're not. Okay. Rashad White's in. We're not sitting him. So
Swift is in. So I think it's really Barkley or Montgomery. So we'll do something thorough here, and we'll put in. So we said it's Saquon versus Monty, right? So this would be very not as much in the favor of one as I was expecting. It's actually very close. You got Saquon at 11.5, Montgomery at 11. Distributions are very similar. So the way that I like to break this is we'll go and look at touchdown expectations. You'd have Saquon around 30% of his matches getting into the end zone. You have 60% of Montgomery's against defenses like Minnesota's. That would make me think about favoring Montgomery, unless of course there is some outside context that we need to add to this that maybe you have thoughts on, Curtis.
The Vikings have been really stingy against opposing running backs. So I know, the GLSP, we're looking across, large historical samples of similar players and similar defenses. If we just zoom in on what's been happening against the Vikings, I mean, they've allowed the second fewest rushing attempts by opposing running backs over the past 5 weeks, just 15.2 running back carries per game over the past 5 weeks. I mean, that's minuscule. 57 rushing yards per game allowed, 3.8 yards per carry. Now they are getting absolutely just shanked in the receiving game by opposing running backs. And, while it's natural to say, well, hey, that sounds like Jahmyr Gibbs, and maybe it is true. I mean, Montgomery's had some receptions as well going. He's had a couple games that have flowed his way there. But that being said, just like on the surface, I don't think this game sets up super well for David Montgomery. If you look at the trends and you look at how the team naturally would like to use each of those running backs. So, I mean, I would probably lean towards Saquon over Monty and eliminate Monty here.
Agreed.
All right. Pick 2. Jonathan Taylor, Bijan, Jordan Addison, or Amari Cooper.
Okay. Jordan Addison coming off of a great game. This is a very good matchup from him through a couple of lenses. What I think, though, we could do, I'd rather here take a quick look at Amari Cooper. He is facing off against a Houston defense that has been pretty tough to wide receivers. We can kind of see that there's not a significant amount of upside for him beyond the 20 bucket. Does get 20% of his matches, though, going between 15 to 20. Curtis, most heavily concentrated in the 10 to 15 bucket. Expected to see around 4.5 receptions, 66 yards, 40% of his matches finding the end zone. We've talked about Bijan here. We know he has a good outlook, but there are many reasons to be concerned. If we layer in Jonathan Taylor and what you might expect in his first game back, you'd be looking at likely a worse distribution here than you're seeing for Cooper. Obviously, for Robinson, an average stat line that gets him to around 60 yards on 15 attempts. 30% of his matches did find the end zone. So that's kind of what we're seeing from a GLSP perspective. Anything else to layer on top of that?
Yeah, the Taylor thing, I've been thinking about this all day, and I've heard some other people talk about it too. I mean, it gets a little tricky because Zach Moss has been a non-participant. So, like, even though Taylor's just coming back, I mean, like, you know, he might get a huge workload in a tight game where, you know, Pittman, you know, he was a limited participant, you know, concussion, you know, so that the team could be without some other weapons, and then like they may have to win this game on Taylor's back. So, like, I really don't want to sit Jonathan Taylor here. I think this is why he's on this squad. You know, the Colts trying to stay alive here. With Amari Cooper, he's got 22 targets over the past couple of weeks. He's vibing with Flacco a little bit. I understand the matchup, you know, issue here. Addison blew up, you know, last week. But, you know, how good do you feel about that being projectable week to week? He is battling with Hawkinson and is Jefferson looking good for this weekend?
I'm not sure if we have a final answer on that, but
I'm checking here right now.
Yeah.
Not on the injury report. So
yeah, so
looking good there. I mean, it's just I don't know. I mean, I kind of just want to go with the 2 running backs here. But you know, if you wanted upside from one of the receivers, it sounds like your case is for Addison over Cooper.
I actually think that overall, though, I would go Cooper.
Okay.
Because
so Cooper and JT, then you're going to pick one and I'm going to pick one.
Yeah, I think I was going to say Cooper and JT after we kind of talked it over.
All right. Well, let's do that. And then if for some reason, you know, this guy, you know, you get cold feet on Amari, you know, I think I'd rank it Bijan and then Addison last year. As we talk through that.
I want to disagree, but I don't.
Josh Pesky, a lot of DeAndre Swift. I feel, didn't we already answer this one?
Swift yeah, I think we did. I'm not sure if they dropped it in twice on accident or if it just I think
I think he posted it on Twitter.
Okay.
And then also posted from his YouTube.
Got it.
And just has slightly different username. So we got you, man. JJ Money, need 1 flex, 1 wide receiver. T. Higgins, Amari Cooper, David Montgomery, Nico Collins, half PPR. Jamar Chase already ruled out this week. T. Higgins with a huge. You're
going with Higgins. Situation. Higgins is in the game.
So we're picking a flex between Amari, Monty, and Nico. I'm gonna go Amari, and I'm just gonna say T. Higgins and Amari Cooper.
Yep. Yeah. Is that simple?
AB Pittman or a Chan, if healthy.
Let's take a quick look at Pittman. We have not talked about him yet. As we mentioned, you do have Indianapolis heading into a matchup with Atlanta. Players like Pittman, we'd expect to see over 9 targets, probably around 6 to 6.5 receptions, 66 yards, 30% of his matches finding the end zone. A pretty nice distribution for Pittman in that it's relatively flat across the buckets, but we don't see any real duds here. As a result, you have him with a good percentage of his matches landing between 15 225. The thing that does need to be noted here, though, is we already talked about the tremendous upside for Achane, although I would argue that he probably has more downside. So we'll pop him in here one last time. Look at his distribution. Of course, when you are the overall RB1 in the week's GLSP, you're going to have a pretty nice distribution. And just to add a little more context here, we see a lot of touchdown potential. 60% of his matches finding the end zone on the ground, 10% via the air. It's really hard to go away from Achane here. We're at the point in the season I'm going after that upside. I just think there's more for Achane. I'm going to put him in the lineup.
I'm good with it, man. Cosign. Gage. Sup, RotoViz. Pick 2. Achane, Jonathan Taylor, Chuba, and Mixon. I'm projected to win by 20, so need a high floor. Okay. I think that helps. That I mean, given the other players in the backfield, maybe this is a situation where, we look at it differently. Maybe let's look at that. We have a floor tool in here. Actually, don't we? Can't we sort our GLSP by 25th percentile? So we don't often do this because people are wanting the ceiling, but we have a function where we can look at, what is the relative downside of each player, and we can run it through that way. So let's do it for 4.
So if you do it on the 20th percentile, we still have Achane coming in as the best running back in that metric. In my mind, I would scale it down a little bit. Just knowing some of the things that have gone into the model and why we're ending up there for him. But I think that's very hard to ignore. Behind him, we also see Joe Mixon with a floor here of 10 PPR, one of the better ones on the week. We did see a decent amount of downside actually for Jonathan Taylor when we looked at him earlier, Curtis. And, I don't think that I'm even factoring in Chuba here in my mind, but we will take a look here and note that with 7.6 PPR, he is the RB15 in that metric. You're looking for a high floor. I think I'm going to go here, probably Mixon and Achane.
Yeah. The only thing I'm going to mention here, if we look at recent trends, Mixon had 8 carries for 16 yards against the Steelers just 4 weeks ago.
Yep.
Now, I don't necessarily think it's fair to really crap on him too much for that, because the Steelers have been, pretty friendly to opposing running backs in the game since. They've actually allowed 4 running back touchdowns over the past 3 weeks, and in all 3 of those weeks, they allowed top 12 rushing attempts against. They also had a couple games in top 10 receptions against. So if you want to zoom in on that just a little bit there, Dave, I'm also going to just look up, just for the fun of it, because we haven't pulled out the Game Splits app yet today, and we're answering so many questions that I always like to do that. I'm just going to look at Joe Mixon against the Steelers.
Sure.
And see if that game stands out versus how he's typically, performed against Tomlin.
Right. So a couple of comments here. Across the season, Pittsburgh actually would be the second easiest or most favorable matchup, given the way that I've set up the strength of schedule app to do its calculations. You did see a couple weeks back, Jerome Ford get to 12 PPR, James Conner 22.5, Zeke at 27, Zach Moss last week at 12.3, and a lot of, pretty good amount of green when you look through the box score stats here for those backs. Overall, I think it is a pretty good matchup. I will be curious to see, and let me know when you have the splits here on Mixon.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on how far. If you don't include enough games, then you get this most recent game sample in there clouding it, right? So if I just look at this year, he had 8 PPR in that game against the Steelers, and he's averaging nearly 16 PPR in all other games. When you include last year, you get 2 more games into it. He is averaging 12.9 versus the Steelers over his last 3 contests, and then 16.6 against all other teams. Of course, that means last year, those games are propping it up. Once you get out to a 5-game sample, he averages his career expectation against the Steelers. Basically, it's 16 out of split, 16 in split.
Yep.
And so the other thing that I would add is with Jamar Chase out, we already said that might line up nicely for T. Higgins. The team could also opt to feature Mixon a little bit more, since the Steelers are going to focus a little bit more on trying to erase Higgins. Maybe the Bengals will ground and pound. I don't really have a problem with the answer of a Chan and Mixon. I think JT would be my backup. So if Gage listening to this, you're like, yeah, I don't know, man. 4 weeks ago, Mixon laid an egg against the Steelers. I think JT would kind of be a 2B option there for me.
All right, Curtis, I'm thinking that there's still questions coming in. We might do a little bit less analysis here, just kind of rapid fire these off.
I did put a 5-minute warning in there. And I said, listen, guys, you've got to go just player versus player. If your question's not already in the chat, then we're just going to go player versus player.
Okay.
Okay. Jalen Warren, Chase Brown, or Deontay Foreman, leaning Warren. Thanks for the help.
Yep. Warren.
Randy Miller, Tanner Hudson, Taysom Hill, Hunter Henry, or Dallas Goedert, PPR.
All right. I do want to do one quick thing here, and I'm going to drop in, unless you have a great lean right off the bat, I do want to look at Goddard versus Hunter Henry.
Yeah, those are the two that jumped forward for me.
So this does favor Hunter Henry, average of 11.4 versus Goddard's 9.8. If you look at the distributions, it's also in the favor of Henry. I had been kind of off of going with Henry, but I think we are seeing things functioning a little bit differently there in New England now. I'm going to go Henry. I want to say Goddard, but I think I got to say Henry.
All right. I am going to look at one more thing. So Goddard has run really cold the last 2 weeks. I think he has 13 targets and he hasn't gotten much done with them. Okay. So now when you put these together here, I mean, Henry also has 12 targets over the past 2 weeks and he has the 3 touchdowns. I mean, I guess they've got similar roles at this point. I don't have a problem with that. Henry with the multi-touchdown upside in any given week, and Zappy really leaning on him in his 2 starts here recently. So I think that's fair.
All right, there we go.
Luke Probasco, Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, Bijan, start 2. Man, lots of people iffy on JT and Bijan this week.
Yeah, we haven't talked about Jacobs yet.
Jacobs is on the injury report right now.
Yeah. Were he to play, you're looking at an average in PPR of around 12.2 points. That said, not a tremendous amount of upside for him this week, which kind of puts him into the same bucket that we saw when we talked about Taylor. I'm inclined to say, Curtis, that if he does play, but it looks like he is a little bit banged up, I'm going to go JT and Bijan here over Jacobs.
Yeah, I'm kind of feeling that regardless.
Yeah,
as well. So, okay, yeah, we're aligned there for Luke. Jonathan Santiago, sit 1, Barkley, Kenneth Walker, Ty Chandler, Devin Singletary, full PPR.
All right. Now, we haven't talked about Walker yet. His GLSP this week, not very friendly against the Titans. Actually might be the worst outlook that he's had across the year. I think we've made a compelling case here for Singletary. I think I would leave Singletary in the game. So it really comes down to Barkley or Walker. And I actually think I'm probably leaning towards Barkley.
We have Chandler in there too as an option.
Okay.
So the last 2 weeks, Tennessee, in 3 of the last 4 weeks, they've allowed a 20-point scorer. Chuba Hubbard, Raheem Mostert, Devin Singletary all got there against Tennessee, and Walker did have a big game of his own last week. So I don't want to lose sight of that. So I think throwing Chandler in the mix here too makes some sense.
Okay. So Chandler's GLSP puts him at an average around 9.9. His distribution is the most heavily concentrated below 5. Of course, some of that is getting factored in games with Madison. So the way this figures out, things tail off from there. So his GLSP, you might have to think about a little bit differently. Who do you want? Singletary, and who's the other player? You make this call.
We get to pick 2. We're sitting 1. There's 4 players.
Oh, we're only sitting 1. I'm sorry. I would. I don't want to sit Walker.
I would sit Chandler. I think. Detroit, man, 30th in fantasy points over expectation ranked to running backs over the past 5 weeks. 29th in PPR allowed. 28th in rushing yards allowed, 22nd in rushing attempts, 29th in yards per carry. Also, bottom third in terms of matchup attractiveness for receiving work by opposing running backs. 22nd in receptions allowed, 20th in receptions or in receiving yards, just averaging 12.4 PPR allowed to the opposing team's RB1 scoring fantasy back. Only Alvin Kamara really had a nice game against them in the past 5 weeks. So given this group, sitting Ty Chandler. Let's see here. Sit one. Oh, this is Jonathan again. Must have 2 teams in the semis. Good job. Sit one, Monty, Walker, Chandler, Aaron Jones.
Aaron Jones.
Yeah, Aaron Jones. Agree. Michael, Albani, Tua, or Kyler, 6 points per passing TD.
All right, fun. So you've got Tua. All right. Now, I have always, and I always probably will have a bias for Kyler Murray that I need to combat here. So you got Tua against the Cowboys. You got Kyler Murray against the Bears. Things favor Tua 16.3 versus 15 in an average game. And if we look at their distributions, you're going to see that there's the largest disparity in the 15 to 20 bucket. And as a result of that, I would say it's a much better outlook overall for Tua. Also, if I control for some other factors in their offenses, I would lean towards Tua here, even if you do have a banged up Tyreek Hill. And I actually don't know what Hill's status is right now, Curtis, but the answer here, I think, is Tua.
I'm not going to push back against that. I agree. I do want to go back to our Hunter Henry versus Dallas Goedert question from just a couple minutes ago. Hunter Henry didn't practice and has a knee tweak. So I'm changing my answer to Dallas Goedert right now, unless Hunter Henry is just full cleared. So I want to go back, and I want to say the person's name again in case they were listening to the podcast. It's Randy Miller's question. So Randy, if you were listening on the podcast here, I'm not sure if you're still on the live stream or not. Hopefully we'll get back to you here, but Dallas Goedert, unless Hunter Henry is full cleared. Okay. Legacy Assault, Taylor Heineke or Mason Rudolph, or I can scratch QB. So this is a super flex question and put in Ty J. Spears, OBJ, or Antonio Gibson. We're not gonna scratch one of those quarterbacks for OBJ. Dave already kind of put that up, the weakness of his matchup earlier.
Okay.
Think Heineke here. But I am curious. It's going to be hard to use the GLSP for either of these quarterbacks, I think.
Yeah, I know. I
why don't you look at?
I do have something here on Heineke, which I think is somewhat reasonable to look at, but maybe a little bit inflated. It puts him at an average of 15.6 here. But I mean, if you think about it, a line of 236 passing yards and 1.6 passing touchdowns doesn't seem that crazy on what he might be able to do. I think here, though, I probably honestly...
The Bengals have been allowing some passing yards, man.
Yeah, they have, man.
I'm looking at this.
They have, man. I think...
Mason Rudolph magic in week 16.
I think that might be the way to go.
Yeah,
I want to make a case for Antonio Gibson, but no, you should go Mason Rudolph here.
I think either one of these so I would definitely start one of the quarterbacks. Okay, so I think we'll go there first. I don't think that Mason Rudolph is going to be in a situation where, I mean, they're not going to bench him and pull Trubisky back in.
So
right?
if Trubisky were playing
that movie, so
yeah, similar outlook for Trubisky. A little bit in favor there of Heineke if you thought that their GLSPs were ones that you could use and you thought that you could assign Trubisky to Rudolph.
So here's the other thing. I mean, we were talking about it on the other side of the matchup with the Steelers and the Bengals a couple of minutes ago on Joe Mixon. They did just play 4 weeks ago. So Kenny Pickett did play that game. It was the first game post Matt Canada, I think. And it was 24-33 for 278 yards. He just didn't throw a passing touchdown in that game. So, I mean, I think that the Steelers, the current iteration of the Steelers offensive brain trust did figure out a way to find the holes in the Cincinnati passing defense in that game. And I mean, we've seen it hold over the past couple of weeks. Even Nick Mullins had a 300-yard game against them last week. So, yeah, listen, man, you're rolling the. I'm sorry to say. I mean, these are 5 kind of iffy options for the semifinals here. So, I mean, none of them are slam dunks. I'll take Mason Rudolph's ceiling here, man. You're trying to get to the championship game.
Yep. All right. And then Luke dropped a couple of helpful notes for us here. Hunter Henry likely won't play. That is a huge bummer. And then Hill practiced in full today. 1 PPR, Barkley or Gibbs. I'm going Gibbs there. Not much hesitation.
Agree. And then final one, man. We're bringing it home in the 50th minute of start sit. Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave.
All right. So I will look at Olave here a little bit more in depth. So Wilson average in the GLSP here at 14.7. Chris Olave, though, an average of 17.1. The GLSP does give him a pretty significant lean when you consider some of the higher end distribution, and also, a pretty good outlook overall for Olave with 19% of his matches going beyond 25, and an average here of 17 points in the GLSP for a wide receiver is a pretty significant total. The final piece that I'll lay on here is because I did say it's a good matchup for Wilson, and I'm not going to head towards saying that you should play Wilson, but I do want to look at Olave's matchup. It's an average matchup against the Rams. I think one of the things that I noted when working through the article this week was that New Orleans tends to move its receivers around and across the formation. This does give Olave a couple of points to pick up, perhaps on some of the weaknesses that you might see in the Rams defense. I think that I would go here Olave pretty confidently.
You can't find there's not much other than bright green in the NFL stat explorer for Olave in this matchup against the Rams. Rams 4th most PPR allowed to opposing wide receivers, 3rd most EP allowed to wide receivers, number 1 and fantasy points over expectation, 17th in fantasy points over expectation rank over the past 5 weeks. But I mean, geez, 1st in targets allowed to the position, 9th in receptions allowed to the position, 4th in receiving yard. I mean, it's pretty much a green light here. Yeah. Now that's to opposing position groups. It's less sensitive than your passing game matchup rater tool for Olave specifically. But there's just been nothing but, pure fantasy production against this Rams defense from opposing passing attacks. And the Saints, desperately need Olave to get back to form here this week. Huge situation for him. So, yeah, man. Wow, this is fast and furious. Huge response to the Week 16 start sit. I'm really impressed with all of the semifinal matchups and live teams that we've got here, that we would have such an overwhelming response to a 4 p.m. pop-up start sit show on a Thursday. Yep. So
Adam, you're gonna sit.
Oh, I got one more.
Adam, you're gonna sit Eckler and Bijan.
Sit Eckler and Bijan. I think that's fair with the quarter point.
It was Bijan or Breeze, but yeah, that's what we're gonna do. But yeah, appreciate everybody. This was awesome. I also appreciate everybody getting in questions via email ahead of things, because sometimes it's hard for us to figure things out, and it's nice to have questions in case we can't get on and do things live.
You guys are the best, man. You make podcasting every week fun. We love the engagement. And hopefully we'll see some of the same engagement if you're already out. Okay, if you're already out of your redraft scenario and you're on the sidelines and you're just listening to this on the podcast, you're probably not degenerate enough to watch our live stream show if you don't have a team live this weekend. But start thinking about those dynasty squads. We'll get into a lot of these types of conversations in that element of the fantasy game, here in a couple weeks. So best of luck in your matchups, all the good vibes, all the positive juju to your rosters, except if you are playing Dave or me. And with that, we're signing off.
All right. Enjoy your holidays, everybody. Thank you for listening.